I wanted to do medicine and I fainted. So I woke up. I just can't handle gore and yucky bits. So I thought, okay, what's like being a doctor but without all the yucky bits? Psychology, combining clinical ideas and techniques with organisational practice.
What you offer to clients is boosting high performance. When do they decide they need to invest in someone like you?
It's often that they've tried the obvious or they've tried what works before and it hasn't worked.
David Heap, leading organisational psychologist who transforms how executives think, lead and thrive. With over 30 years of experience, today he reveals what really drives organisational change, not policy manuals or incentive structures, but the minds and relationships of those at the top.
David, welcome to the Martian Logic Podcast.
Okay, thank you, Anwar. Great to be here.
You are welcome. You're welcome. So can you explain to us what do you do for a living?
Okay.
And take us through your journey from being a young person, maybe before you went to uni or anything like that.
All right. So I describe myself now as an organisational psychologist, which is my professional grouping, membership, but also as an executive coach, which is a lot of what I do, not the only thing, but a lot of what I do is having conversation like this with people like you. So going way, way back, how I got into this is that at school I wanted to do medicine and thought that's a nice thing to do, helping people, scientific, that sort of thing. But then I went into Sydney University medical school in year 12 just to have a look. There was all kinds of pictures on the walls of people with firecracker injuries and various other things, and I fainted. So I woke up outside with multiple professors of medicine leaning over me. I just can't handle gore and yucky bits. So I thought, okay, what's like being a doctor but without all the yucky bits? Psychology. So I
brain doctor.
A brain doctor. Something like that.
Mind doctor, whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what I ended up doing. Did the 4-year degree, UNSW, professional degree. And really that qualified you to be a clinical psychologist. So I was initially would have been classified as a psychologist or a clinician. But I've never actually worked in a hospital as a clinician. My first job was with the Air Force down at Wagga, which was a great first job because it was kind of isolated. And you basically are in general practice and you have to do everything yourself. So it's a real mixture of general practice or clinical practice. So thrown in a deep end in a sense. And there was people all around me. So there was other psychologists, 2 other psychologists. But it was it was the start of, I guess, my career path, which is combining clinical ideas and techniques with organisational practice. So working as a psychologist in an organisation. And so
didn't get the part of
where
does the organisation come into this?
Because you're working with people who are in-house. So
in-house.
So I worked with so it's an apprentice, a technical training school down at RAF Wagga. And
so you're part of RAF as opposed to being in a part of a separate practice in Wagga that you provide that service.
No, exactly.
An in-house psychologist.
Yes, I was a RAF psychologist working on the base. They had about 2,000 apprentices and technical trainees. And we were there, one, to assist with their mental health, because there's all these little 15-year-old boys who are taken out of their family, their head shaved off, which is in 1980 was a big thing, and they're taken away from their families. They're given a 4-year apprenticeship to do in 2 years, and this nasty man keeps shouting at them all the time. So any incipient mental health issues, they emerge. So lots of interesting work there.
Interesting.
But it was also testing people, assessing them, looking for their strengths and weaknesses based upon the results of the psychometric testing, and then giving them some initial advice on what they can do given their test results and a bit of a chat, what they can do in order to maximize their chances of success on this program. So we screened everyone who came in as a student, trainee, and identified their strengths and their vulnerabilities or their weaknesses, and gave them advice on both sides of the ledger there, which is very similar to what I do now with 40 and 50-year-old executives run 15-year-old apprentices. But the process is remarkably similar.
Okay. How long you've been in this practice now that you're in? Did you found this
So Insight Management
business?
Consulting is something I founded when I was working for a consulting group, PA Consulting Group, and there was a recession we had to have, and so the number of consultants dropped markedly.
The GFC you're referring to?
No, the one before that, or one of the ones before that. This was the early 90s.
Oh, I know that one.
Keating's Banana Republic, the recession we had to have.
I know that.
And so I started it up because none of the other consulting firms or anyone else was hiring. So I just start working for myself.
So that's like 30 years.
Oh, yeah, 30 years ago. And I've lapsed every couple of years, gone into getting jobs. People ring me up and offer me, shiny, glittery prizes. I think, in-house to move in-house. In-house, usually in consulting firms.
Sure.
I'll do that for a couple of years, and it's a bit boring or a bit restricted, and so I go back to this. So I've really been working for myself since about 1991.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's get back to the juicy stuff now. Okay. One of the services that you've got on the website that you, in terms of what you guys offer, what you offer to clients, is boosting high performance. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
What does that mean, and what would be a typical situation here? You're talking about a team. Do you deal with a whole team situation or one person?
So
at a time?
There's usually 3 levels of, if you like, focus or analysis. One's individual, so that might be executive coaching. Other is then the next level of aggregation up is working with teams or groups in the organisation. So again, there's team building.
So what's the diagnosis when people ring you up, or when the CEO decides that, yes, we're going to spend $10, $20, $30, $50,000 with someone like David because we have some performance issue? What's the diagnosis? How does that play out?
So usually you have an initial chat with whoever the sponsor or the client is and talk to them about, okay, tell us about what's going on at the moment. And
no. When do they decide they need to invest in someone like you, and they start
like
to
before
call
that?
you? Yeah. Internally in the organisation, give us a typical scenario where they go, we're going to need some help here.
So various
typical scenario. Example.
Okay, so often it's because they've tried simpler things and it hasn't worked.
But that's not across the whole thing. It's more like a particular department, particular team. Is that how it emerges? They see that?
Relatively few people engage people like myself because things are going well and they want them to go better. Usually I'm brought in because there's an issue. There's a problem.
Having problems.
And it's often that they've tried the obvious, or they've tried what works before and it hasn't worked. And so they look around for another way of resolving it. And where they have accepted that, okay, we need to get more serious here. We need to bring in a specialist professional, and we need to do more than obvious.
So typically, therefore, you come in and there's a particular exec or a manager that you're sort of talking to.
So it depends.
Or working with them.
So for the organisational consulting, that's usually the case, in that there's an issue and it may be an executive, or it may be a team, or it may be the whole organisation.
We're talking performance, and when you say, so must be probably
so it's
boosting high performance.
It's boosting high performance is often with singular executives who are either going to go, so in a group level, that will be on an executive development or a leadership development program. So these are people who've been identified. as having potential for higher levels of leadership. So when I was working at Deloitte, I was working mainly with senior partners who were already managing or leading large parts of the business, and they were being primed to take on even more senior roles than that. Right. So they were very successful, but they wanted to prepare the people to make sure they were going to continue to be successful at a higher level of responsibility. So part of the national senior leadership team carrying that.
So that's organisational psychology.
So that's applying organisational psychology in a systematic way to leadership development. So one of the characteristics of how organisational psychologists work is we tend to work systematically. We work with systems, not just individuals, but we work with teams as systems, but also at the organisational level. So most of the graduates of the programs, the Master of Org Psych at Macquarie Uni, where I work with them, they tend to go into OD or learning and development in one of those areas of HR. Culture change, organisational change, risk management, that sort of thing. And the idea is you think in terms of systems, both in terms of the diagnosis or the assessment, and then the analysis of the data you bring in there, and then your design of the intervention.
That's the system.
So that's the process.
Okay, the process. All right. Well, we're going to dissect it. We're going to take our time. So let me just recap. We're talking boosting high performance.
Yes.
And you're saying, let's say you've been called into company A.
Yep.
There's a particular exec who's doing okay, but they've recognised they have a lot more potential, and they want you to work with them to improve that. Is that a typical scenario?
Yes, and it's either at an individual level or a group level. So what I described at Deloitte was there's usually a dozen.
How can it ever be at a group, at an individual level?
Well, I'll give you an example. So first I've just picked up a job where I'm talking with the CEO on Thursday, and then as in next Thursday, and then I'm going to meet the person the week after. And this is a person who has been going very well in his marketing role, and they have decided to promote him into a line management area as part of the sales. So he's going to be let's call it an area sales manager or divisional sales manager. And they have every confidence he'll do well, but they've brought me in, or they're bringing me in to work with him in the first 90 days of his transition. I do this quite a bit to make sure that he's able to make that adjustment efficiently and effectively.
Okay. All right.
So
David, what I want to hear though about, I would like you to talk about you've been brought into a company, and you're saying sometimes you're working with a number of execs and sometimes with a particular exec. And I want to focus on this scenario to dissect it and make it easy to consume this content. We've got a particular exec whereby maybe they're doing okay, but they've recognized they could be doing a lot better, a lot more.
Yes.
Is that a good scenario?
Yeah, no, that happens.
Let's focus on that. Educate me, please. How do you start with this? Because what I was saying, it's never about just person. It's the person and the team and the environment around them.
Yes,
you can only do so much with that one person just sitting there with them talking all day.
Agree. So that's that systems perspective I'm talking about. So the first briefing, the first thing I always try and do with any job is clarify expectations either way. So I'll sit down and talk to someone like you, the CEO or the owner or the partner or whoever, and just say, okay, tell me what you would like in terms of the outcomes. What do you want to be different? What do you want to be better?
You're talking to the exec now?
So I'm talking to the client. Could be the HR director, could be the CEO.
Your client, the contact person is doing the contract
not
with you.
the coachee.
Got it. And you're saying, before we can sign the contract or give you any pricing or whatever, what are you trying to achieve? What would be a good outcome for you?
What's the job? So clarifying expectations.
Well, I'm going to play that role with you.
Okay,
good. We have this, I've got one of my leaders who's a really good person.
Yes.
And he's new to a leadership role. We've recognized his potential. Yes. He's a man of integrity. He works hard. He's really amazing with clients. He's worked in the sales and account management. Yep. And we made him the leader for the account management team. Okay. And he's doing a great job. Same with the sales manager. Both of them doing a good job, but I believe they could do more. If I was to hire you to work with them, let's use both of them as an example here. Okay. How would you start the conversation? So I'm saying to you, look, I think they could be doing better. Okay. Yeah.
They're looking for that. So when you say doing better, tell me what that would look like. What does better look like? What would be success for you?
Great question. Now you've turned me around. That is how you've got to approach it. I love it. Yep. And I can answer that.
Okay, good.
Genuinely, I'm talking about. Yeah. So I think they're both fairly new to leadership, in particular leading their teams. I'm talking about real leadership, leading people. Yep. You know what? They've got leadership material. They're good people. They are leaders in the sense, born leaders.
Got potential.
But
good.
Management skills, I believe they could do that better. Okay. Hence why they need to start to use our performance management. I'm not joking. No. I'm really putting pressure on them now to start to use our performance management tool. I'm not trying to sell anything. And I'm suggesting to them, for example, to do weekly catch-up with their people, to really hold people accountable on a weekly basis. Yep. So I'm sharing with you exactly what's going on. Okay. Managing people, hold them accountable so we start to see better performance in their teams. Okay. This is really where I feel they could use some help with.
Okay, so I'll be taking notes at this point. And I think what I hear you describing is expectations around inputs or management. What would you like them to be doing more of and better?
You're asking me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just I believe, I mean, look, I think it's this whole thing, and I have no doubt they're going to just kill it. Yeah, they are really good people. But if I was to be hiring you, I think it would be worth to work with them just in case for a bit. Yeah. And it would be really just to make sure we get that performance. But also, I want to build some good culture. I want their teams to be happy, but super motivated and driven.
Okay. So there's so I'm hearing two things, and this is kind of a timeout, but there's inputs and outputs. So one of the things you said was you just spoke about the impact on their followers. On their followers. So leaders have followers.
Yeah, sure.
So I think one of the main ways that leaders succeed is by creating followers and developing followership amongst their team members. Because leaders have followers, but managers have employees, staff members. Yeah. So I just heard you say that you would like that their followers to be more motivated and a few things like that.
And more committed. More motivated, committed.
So that's one of the outputs, is you want to see differences.
Commitment and focus.
Commitment, focus amongst their team members.
Yes.
Okay. But then you're also saying, and I shouldn't have said but, and you're also saying that you'd like, in order to do that, you see that what they'd need to do is to do more of these management behaviours, setting goals and targets and
clear goals and hold them accountable against those goals. That's my guess. I could be wrong.
So that's what I'd be looking at doing in terms of, so at the end, if we see them doing these things, putting inputs into it, you'd be expecting also to see changes in the team culture, about the behaviour of their team members. Yeah. Can we stretch it far enough for it to be business results?
Absolutely, that's the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah. So what you think would be realistic but stretch and ambitious changes in their business commercial performance?
They're fresh teams, and what I mean by that is we don't have real evidence from historically about what their respective teams can do. Yeah. We have a good idea They've got a good idea.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure they really get that in terms of their, for example, they are both in the commercial team, so selling, one is speaking with our clients and working with them on adopting more of the platform so they can get more revenue from existing clients. One's selling to brand new companies. So both are commercial. So it's really their KPI ultimately when you say business. It's fairly measurable, very, very measurable.
So one of the things that it'd be good, and this is about the expectations, is understanding that value chain, that causal flow from the things you want them to be doing as managers and leaders, the inputs, through to the impact upon their staff members, their team members, and then flowing through into what they do with their clients and commercial metrics. So that's creating a really nice map in my mind of exactly what it is you want to get out of this. I think that's setting expectation. And then I would talk to you a little bit more around, okay, what's your expectations about how I would go about this? Have you engaged people like me before? Have you been coached?
No.
Okay.
So therefore, I'm not going to have a lot of expectation. I would trust you and trust them to do whatever it takes. I just want to see, because they're good people, they're hardworking people, they are good leaders. The fundamentals are right, and I think they can do it, and they should be able to do it. I think they just need to learn better management skills, in my opinion.
So then in terms of clarifying expectations both ways, I might start then talking about how I would generally go about this. And for people who are already high performers, I'll probably talk about two things. One is about building on their strengths, understanding either through some psychological assessments, but also talking to them.
The strengths of the leaders?
The strengths of the leaders. What do you, we get your view of it. Why did you choose them? What makes you think that they've got potential in this area?
They've got high integrity and they've got the right skills. They've got experience in the area and high integrity. And I believe that's all it takes to create a leader that succeeds.
Okay, good. So then we would then talk about, they're the strengths. How can we, and this would be, what we'd be looking for is then building upon those strengths. There's a model in positive psychology called broaden and build. So the idea is to get people.
I like that.
Get people to actually double down on their strengths, the things that got them there.
Never heard it being said like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a standard technique, but broaden and build. Broaden it out from the roles they've had before into the higher roles, but into other situations, other relationships, and build upon that. Don't get people. So one of the models I use a lot is this. Where
it's all good.
It's often where I go to a whiteboard. I'm old enough to like whiteboards.
Plenty of space.
It's fine.
Go crazy.
But the idea is people's signature strengths. Is basically an overlap, Venn diagram here, between their capabilities, their knowledge, their skills, their personal attributes, their behaviours, their values, and their passions, the things that drive them, their sense of meaning, the values and goals they have for themselves that give them a sense of meaning and purpose, but also what do they enjoy about work. So in terms of what do they find rewarding? So simple exercise, I get people to say, so what's the difference between a day where you go in at 7:30 or 8 o'clock or whatever, and you walk out the door at 5 o'clock and your tail is still held high, you've still got just as much energy walking out as you did walking in? What were you doing on that day? And then I say, okay, so contrast that with those days where at 5 o'clock you walk out and it feels like your soul has been sucked from your body. Just awful. It's just been an awful. Tell me about what you were doing on that day. So we get a map there of you know, that overlap between things you're good at and things you love, and your signature strengths or your best self is when you're doing those things at that overlap. It's kind of, when you think about it, it's kind of obvious. Do things that you love and you enjoy. Don't do things that you're shit at and you hate.
So we meant by the overlap, not to do the stuff that you're not good at.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there's things we can discuss on the margin about things that maybe you have to do. It's like administrative overburden. Everyone has to fill out forms and stuff. But we talk about ratios, so Pareto principle is quite useful here. If it's just 20% of your work is boring admin or stuff that doesn't light you up,
it's manageable.
you can get by with that because that's just reality. Okay, sometimes everyone has to do the photocopy.
80% enjoyable.
But if you've got, and 80% gives you joy and makes you love your life,
tenable,
and you're good at it, and you feel good because people. Okay, the overlap's often quite big because people love being good at something, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. So the overlap's often, you love what you're good at, and you're good at what you love. So we try and find that, and you double down on that. So that's the building on those strengths, and what do you do with all that other stuff that you're no good at and you hate? Well, at a strategic level, you get yourself.
How about if that's managing people? Or a leader, someone that we spotted leadership in them because they've got good integrity. They're, in this case, they're really good at selling. Now, I'm not saying they're not good at that. I'm just saying, imagine situation that's more of a hypothetical.
So if you've got someone,
got a leader that is not good at managing people, that's pretty bad, right?
So there'd be so I would just be a little bit pedantic there. Are they not good at managing people, or do they just don't like working with others?
Ooh, no, definitely managing people. So they love working with others.
So what's the difference?
Damn. Let me think. The management aspect, holding people accountable, maybe being, in other words, having to say to someone, look, this is unacceptable. What's going on? Being assertive and firm with people. Maybe they're not used to do that.
So again,
just culturally speaking and who they are, their personality. Maybe.
So if it's their personality or a deep cultural value, that's one of the sticky things. It's probably not going to change. So you've then got to make decisions about should I promote this person into management role? They might be better off because they're going to hate anything.
How can someone be good at their profession? Good people, good values, good integrity. Now they do want to be promoted. They do want to go off. They believe they deserve now to be up here.
Yeah, okay.
And how can they not say now it's time for me to be able to assert to people if they are supported by a leader like me who's going behind and say, I'm going to support you with your decision no matter what. Yeah. They're not going to ever fear there's going to be consequences for that because I'm saying, go and do it. I'll support you with whatever you do there. Why would they not become that sort of person?
So if it's a personality or a deep value, or I'll get to in a second.
I don't know about the value. It's more of a personality.
Okay. Personality is one of those things by definition that remains constant over time and situations.
Yeah. So, no idea. Give us an example here.
Okay. So
how can someone in their person, they're good at what they do. They are they want it to be as a manager.
Okay. So one of the big 5 personality factors. Do you know the big 5 of personality?
Oh, yes. So it's been a while, but
extroversion, introvert. Neuroticism, emotional stability is one scale. Extroversion, introversion is another. The third one usually is agreeability versus bluntness. So someone who is highly agreeable, where it's really, really important for them to have good, positive relationships with others, which means they're often good in sales because they're warm and lovely and want everyone to be their friend. They're a Labrador. just love people and all want to come up and hugs, they're huggers. Whereas those people, how do you think they go when it comes to having that hard performance management decision with someone who they're close to but is underperforming?
Well, I mean, I can see what you mean. Thank you for the education. You made it super clear.
Yeah.
However, if I can challenge that a little bit, or just ask you about that, wouldn't it, in this case, giving them the tools help a lot? Because if you've got this performance management in place, whatever the system is, it could be a bunch of Excels and Words. I'm not so. If I may, David, just 1 minute. No matter what the tools are for that particular environment, that just works there. It doesn't have to be a sophisticated tool. But they have a tool whereby by the end of the week, it's showing that this person now is really did not do well at what they were supposed to do. They don't even have to say it. All they have to say, what do you think you're going to do to do better next week? I mean, it's already there. And that person knows it's in the records. You don't even have to highlight that, oh, look, you did actually bad in this. It's right there.
Now, you're saying that very rationally, but from their perspective, if they're perceiving that as, oh my God, if I bring this up in front of them, they may not like me. So
they will find it uncomfortable.
But you can work with that. So what you need to do is a cognitive reframe or a perceptual reframe of that person. Say, okay, let's see how would you go about it in a way that that uses your power of relationship, of this working alliance and partnership,
which is what they're good at, being agreeable, being good.
How could you use that in order to get the person to see this and come on board with this and change and get them to work out for themselves what they need to do? So it's often
example. I got a little confused, although I can see where you're going with this. I appreciate it. I can see there's something there in what you're saying. Give me an example just to explain it properly to me.
So,
because I gave you the example where, it's just performance. Let's say it's sales. It's about figures perhaps, or number of meetings you booked for the week, and they've adopting this performance review system, and they came to the end of the week, and that person did, let's say, 3 meetings instead of 5. How do you recommend to educate the leader for them to highlight that in a way where it's still sort of bring positives into it or something? Is that what you're suggesting?
So often the personality factors are just about perceptions. And so people will look at that situation, and because what matters to them is positive relationships, they will, if you like, particularly if they're just a little bit negative in terms of how they see the world, they will look for the dark side of that and say, oh my God, no, there's a risk there. It's going to threaten my relationship if I bring up that gap, that 3 versus 5 difference. And so they'll tend to avoid it. So they may. So what I would do in coaching the person is say, okay, let's look at, okay, what could you do that's consistent with your strengths? And perhaps taking a more Socratic approach, rather than telling the person that their performance is not up to scratch and compelling them to do something different. What happens if you just had a conversation with the person? And you kind of said this yourself. Just bring up, look, there's 3 and there's 5. What's going on? Talk to me about what's happening here. Is there any reason why that happened? And okay, and let's work together and see what we can do in order to get you to come up to the required standard. Because look, it's, I really like you. I think you're great. I've got a lot of respect for you. I want you to do well. So that's the idea of getting people to perform well in a way that fits in with their natural inclinations. So you're not trying to turn a dog into a cat. You're just trying to make a better dog.
Mm.
That metaphor works. So it's really so the first
David,
stage is always understanding.
Can we bring it back to the example?
Yes, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
I think that was amazing, and you've opened my eyes on a whole area of things that I could be doing. So thank you.
Okay, so what's
I'll bring you that example with sales.
Yes.
And let's just say about booking meetings,
okay,
which is the first stage in sales. You book meetings, you convert them to sales. So, and let's say KPI is very clear. They need to do, 10 meetings in a week to be booked.
okay,
and that manager has got the tools to sit down in the morning and say, okay, this is this week. It's a 5-day week. It's looking good. Blah blah blah. As you know, it should be possible for you to do 10 meetings, and they write that in that tool. On Friday afternoon at 4 p.m., they sit down and they can see clearly this person did only 6.
right.
How do you recommend that manager would frame it? You're talking about framing, right? Before you use that word. How do you just give me a real example, 5-6 words? How would they highlight that to them without this manager feeling uncomfortable?
Okay. So on Monday, we agreed that what you needed to do was to make 10 meetings, 10 appointments.
Yeah. And they agreed to it because that's your business as usual.
Okay, good. Yep. Right. So where are we now? They should ask the other person, how many did you book?
Oh, that was Monday morning. Nothing. It's just, I'm talking about 8:30 on Monday morning. Sorry.
Yeah.
They've agreed on a 10, and now they're meeting about the
week later,
how the week went.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
Friday at 4 p.m.
So I'd say then, and I'd know that they did 6 instead of 10, but I'd ask them.
Oh, I misunderstood what you said. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm with you.
I'd be advised. So the idea is to get people comfortable with being non-confrontational about it, because they're afraid of confrontation.
Yeah. So give me an example. Let's get back.
So that's it. So we agreed, Anwar, that you would make 10 appointments, meetings
with you.
on Monday. It's now 6. Friday. How many did you book?
Let them say 6.
Yeah.
So I'll say 6, and then.
All right. Okay. How do you feel about that? Because again, these people are feelers. Okay? The other end of the spectrum will be the blunt ones who are low agreeable.
Yeah.
They don't care. They would just come in. And look, neither is good or bad. Because if you're doing negotiations, you want the low agreeable types on your side. Anyway,
no.
Yeah,
I got it.
So they both can be just as effective, and motivating, but they will go about it differently.
Got it. Yeah, I like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Actually, everybody should approach it like that.
So that's the idea. So the important thing is knowing the person's mixed pattern of strength of their personal characteristics. Now, some weaknesses in some situations can be strengths in others. And so what I said there, the example I'm giving, is how being very highly agreeable and empathic and relationship focused can be fantastic in a lot of situations. But in others, it might make them avoidant of anything they perceive as creating conflict or disrupting relationships they value. And so so that coaching would basically, first of all, get them to recognize this, and second, to get them, work with them, partner with them, in order to devise ways, methods, in which they still achieve the outcomes, the targets, but in a way that's consistent with their own values and preferences and management and personal styles. Because you can get people to do things that's contrary to their personality or values and beliefs, so they can comply. It takes a great deal of psychological effort and energy to do so. So they're more likely to relapse, to go back to where they are. And I've seen this a lot, where I've seen people who have been working so hard to be different who they are. It's just burnout territory. Whereas if they can just be themselves, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy because they're just being themselves and they're bringing their best selves to their jobs.
So you're saying here in this example that you used, by them approaching it, how they would approach it naturally by saying, how do you feel about that? As opposed to teaching them to be more assertive, to say, oh, look, it's 4 p.m. on Friday. I can see that you did 6 meetings out of 10. That's 60%. As you know, this is pretty bad. That's not acceptable. You're saying that they might be able to do it for a few weeks, but they will never be themselves and they will never enjoy it. And eventually they will stop doing it.
They will be awake the entire night. All that happened. And I'm quoting from reality here. There are people, this is more around annual reviews rather than weekly reviews. I know managers who before their annual reviews with their
they lose a lot of sleep,
they would not go to sleep.
Oh my God.
Because they were just so tense about having
those confrontational
to have those what they perceived as confrontational conversations, the negative emotions associated with that. They were just staring at the ceiling the whole night. And often that's the case for the person receiving as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Yeah. It just made me think about something right now. The word conflict, we've used confrontational, but I thought about conflict as well.
Yeah.
Is it or is it not? Does it make it easier to think for those managers if they were part of a culture whereby whenever the conversation within their teams or when they are part of a team or company-wide conversations, if there's a good psychologically safe culture, that means conflict-based conversation, people are comfortable with that. People comfortable to speak their mind. Would that make it a bit more easier for them to know that that's acceptable? This is how we can speak our minds, and people don't rationally accept that. People, do you know what I mean?
Yes. No, I know what you mean.
Would it help a bit
if there's a culture that this is the way we go about it here? We're open and honest, and we have courageous conversations. And all those descriptors. And the person might be slightly trepidatious to start with. No, but they will adjust, particularly if they're trained in how to do it and they have confidence that this is good. I can do this. They look around the table and see people having these upfront, honest, maybe blunt sometimes, conversations with each other. They'll adjust their mindset and they'll fit in to the group norm. That's one of the things that people do. We're group animals and social animals, and that we tend to go with the culture, the norms of the group that we're in at a particular moment. So if that's the norm and they feel like they belong to that group, belonging to that group
could have a positive impact on them becoming comfortable to be confrontational.
Exactly. Because that's just the way we do things around here, and it's fine.
Another reason why creating psychologically safe environments, another reason, I guess, a small maybe byproduct of why it's a good thing.
And look, in a lot of sales environments, that kind of hard-nosed, commercial, outcome-focused culture is the norm.
Sure.
And often what happens is you get people who are already comfortable with that approach, attracted to that. People who are deeply uncomfortable with that will tend to move out.
Okay, so thanks for that, David. Boosting high performance is the topic that we started to talk about. And what did we do so far as helping us to learn more about that, David, and what you do and what does that entail? So if there's a manager listening, if there's an exec listening, what are the things that you would like for them to know or be aware of?
So one of my catchphrases is, it's not about you, it's about them. So the most important thing you can do to boost other people's performance anyway, as a leader or manager, is to know your people, find out about them, And so find out what's important to them in terms of those strengths and passions, motivators and things, and say, and for the strengths of the knowledge and the skills and all that, maybe they're great in their technical area, but they haven't had any management training or they haven't had sales training or they're got a bit of a gap. They haven't done this since uni 10 years ago and they need a refresher in it. So knowing the person's capability profile, their strengths and gaps, because it's often not weaknesses, real. I mean, sometimes it's good. You can describe something as a weakness when it's got that motivational element in there. They just don't like doing it. That's not, just have to accept it because it's really going to change. But it may be something where they have the potential to be really good at it, but they just haven't had the training in it. So you might want to have that review of their skill profile and say, okay, mate, I think what would be really good for you is if you went back and did this, but the sales training we have, sales division, I think that's really going to help. So I'll put you on the course to do that. And the next course is in July.
Okay.
I'll put you down there.
So this started by you saying one big advice that you would say to an exec is get to know your people.
Yes.
Correct? That change.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So get to know them, really know them, meaning what they care about, meaning personally.
That too.
Not just about their skills and stuff and their strengths and weaknesses, but even what they care about as a human being. Their kids, their dogs, their the gym, their food lifestyle, whatever.
Yeah, look,
you know what I mean?
That's important in terms of developing a relationship. But I would say the emphasis, at least initially, or in terms of if we're talking about performance improvement, should be about work-related stuff.
But the whole trust, you don't establish trust if you don't know people, what they care about.
That's true. So I would still...
Those little conversations about the kids and about a blah, so they start to realize, oh, I can actually speak about that. They are listening to me. They do care about that. And, they become more comfortable.
No, you're right.
To share and, You're
right. Yep. No, I remember talking to, I won't say which organisation, but it was a large global organisation that had they called it a university, but it was a big training and development centre in Singapore. I was talking to the head guy there and he said, look, we could do all these courses online. But we bring all our people together into the one campus so they get to know each other. So the person who's in charge of the Shanghai office gets to meet the person who's in charge of Manila, who meets the Sydney and the Melbourne person.
Build trust, right?
And they build trust in the relationship so that when they hear about some opportunity in China that the Sydney office can take care of, they'll just ring up their mate and say, mate, you should talk to Guangzhou over in Bada. So it's getting together and just building those personal relationships rather than just purely business relationships. I agree with you totally there. That is important. I also call it naked and drunk in the pool at 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's probably not always. But you get to know, but the important thing is getting to know the person as a person, not as an executive or a salesperson.
Yeah, because that's if you really want them to open up and to start to share, and I'm talking about business here. If we go back to business, be able to share their weaknesses. They're not going to do it if they've got their guards up, if they still don't trust you. They're not going to share with you their weaknesses. They're going to pretend they're good at everything, and they're not going to even share what's even another important thing is they're not going to share when they make a stuff up. They'll try to hide it instead of saying, yep, it's me, sorry, it's on me.
Absolutely agree. Trust and respect, absolutely vital to having a good work relationship and a good team. Just in terms of ethics, I would let it develop
ethics?
Naturally.
What's ethics?
I know business. Back at business school.
In the context of this.
So I did my MBA back in the 80s, and they have whole subjects on it now.
Yeah.
But there was 1 hour lecture devoted to ethics in marketing, I think. and it got
In
cancelled.
this context, what's ethics?
So the ethics is respecting personal boundaries.
Okay.
So if I say, Anwar, tell me about your family, tell me about your wife, tell me about your kids, and the person might feel, oh, this is my personal life. I'm not willing to share this yet.
It's so interesting, David. So interesting, man, because someone I was talking to, organizational psychologist like yourself, said to me she calls these things, that whole thing to build trust, she calls them micro something. If I was to use my own word to describe that, let's call them micro conversations, Okay. Meaning you go to the kitchen, someone's in the kitchen. Oh, hi, how you going? How was your weekend? Yeah. You don't just good. Like take interest and listen to what they tell you. And the next time you remember because you did that, you build on that a little bit. So you don't necessarily have to say to them, tell me about your family. Just naturally, those micro little conversations, you start to get to know people without being you intruding or asking about anything.
No, that's exactly it. That's exactly my point. So it's letting the person, if you like, volunteer the information so they don't feel obliged to because you're the boss to reveal things which is close to them, that the trust develops. So the trust, in a sense, has to be nurtured.
Absolutely.
It's like a relationship.
Absolutely. You can't buy it, and also, it's really interesting. You said ethics, and what I mean is because the reason she was talking about that, she's talking about trust. But also, she was saying how a manager or a leader can stuff all this up. Let's say you've got this office of 20, 30, 50 people on that floor, or let's say 20 or 30, because otherwise people on the other end are not going to hear or see that if it's too big. Let's say 20, 30 people. Okay. And you've got the kitchen, which is similar to what we have. I go into that kitchen, and someone is talking to me, and I say, how was the weekend? And they're trying to tell me what's about their weekend, and I cut them off and say, I'm sorry, I've got to go, whatever. Yeah. And people are hearing what I've just said. I would have just destroyed that culture that we are talking about here, about building trust. So, you've got to lead by example of really, in every respectful way, listen and show interest in people's lives. And that's how you start, this little thing start to build everywhere. And your leaders will do that to their respective employees. So you can set the tone in that way. Exactly. And that's how you start to build these little micro conversations.
Absolutely. So one of the most important things you can do as a leader is to role model the values of a culture you want to create. Yes. So you might...
I love the way you said it. Role model the values and the culture. Yes, I want to write it down.
Cool. So you might want to just say, if you just drop it as a bomb, but naturally you just might say, well, look, everyone have a great Easter. I'm heading off to the Gold Coast to meet my family up there, and we're just going to hang out at a caravan park and do all that. And they'll say, oh, really? We're in the Gold Coast, you go. Oh, I used to go up there myself and blah, 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 blah. And so you kind of, you self-reveal yourself. You take the initiative. You role model the way we do things around here. That little vulnerability
thing, you open up a bit.
Yes, and you just be open and honest, and other people will follow you. Yeah. I might say, I'm going down the South Coast, or I'm staying at home. I'm just going to have a staycation here.
So interesting. What we just did in doing that, thank you for that example, because, and how you explained it, because it started, the vulnerability thing started at a personal level, because we want to lead it into the professional thing. When I say it's my fault, I've stuffed this up, or I suck at this, which is what we want to encourage people to show vulnerability in their profession. So it starts from here. So really, even that conversation as a leader in that example, I've already started to role model the fact that, yes, you can be vulnerable. Yes. And we will respect your vulnerabilities. You will never be judged on them. They will never be held against you.
So one of the most important things that leaders can do, and this is as well as role modeling, is also tell stories about themselves. And often it is about their journey. So So when you're running particularly early leadership, emerging leadership development programs in organizations, it's really good to bring in some of the senior executives in the firm to talk to the young trainee
Yes,
leaders.
yes.
And they often tell stories about what happened in their first team leadership role. And it's good to be self-deprecating and be a bit funny and things like that.
And show that vulnerability.
And show the vulnerability and
you're leading by example.
And you lead by example and give them messages like, look, you might be anxious about this, about taking on the extra responsibilities, and you might have a look at people like the CEO, like myself, and you think, oh, I could never be like that person. Well, let me tell you, I was exactly like that 20 years ago.
Yes.
I was in exactly the same program.
Yeah. And you don't even have to say it. If you start by having this conversation, you're actually, that's what you're implying. That's what you're saying. Do you know what I mean? Like, share their stories. I'm agreeing with you. It's so important because that sends that message anyway, indirectly.
And you just see, it's almost like they're sitting around a campfire and the village elder is telling stories. And storytelling is a really powerful way
Absolutely.
or to communicate values and culture. What's the right way to do things?
Yes.
What are the ways to get ahead in this organisation? What leads to success? How and knowing. So often it's thinking about when you're preparing to do that kind of thing. I always get people to think about, okay, so think about yourself when you were 25 and you were just in your first management role. Mm-hmm. Think about that, about what you were worried about then, and think about that person. Tell us about that person, and then talk about your journey from that little accountant or engineer or whatever you were, and give a bit of a sense of that journey went through from there, about how you developed and grew from that baby leader all the way through to where you are as a CEO or whatever it is.
David, this is amazing. I'm writing it down. Thank you so much.
The storytelling, again, is really, really important. Again, I get people to think about and talk about their stories, their past story, but also their future story. So one of the really cool exercises is what I want you to do is to tell me about a day in the life of you, say 3 years' time, if everything works out well.
Got it.
Your ideal day in the life in 3 years' time.
It's like when I say to people, tell me what does this job mean to you in your life? What being happy in this job and doing well, what sort of impact does that do in your life? I guess this is what I'm asking them. How is that going to help your lifestyle and your aspirations and what you want to do with your life? Like buying a house, like getting married, like start to do trips, so I guess the same thing, right?
So it's very similar to what you do in strategic planning. What's the mission? Where do you see that your organisation in 3 years' time? What does that look like? What's your market share? How much you're earning? How do you differentiate yourself against your customers, your competitors rather? All these sorts of things. So tell me about that. Where are you living when when you look out your bedroom window when you wake up? What do you see? Are you in the city? Are you out at the beach? Are you on an island? And then tell me about how you get to work. Tell me about where you're working, where the office is, what you're doing. Give me a really accurate picture of that. And that is useful both in terms of helping the person visualize and look at a destination where they want to go. And
how do we get into this topic?
It's still
so
about success. It's still about success
Mm-hmm.
because in the sense that
success.
I'm asking the person to tell me about what success looks like to you.
Correct.
I want you to visualize it.
Yeah. And why are we talking about that? Why are we talking to that person? Yeah, I think I know what you mean. We're talking about the performance, and we're talking about getting to know your team. You said the first advice you give to an exec to understand your team.
Yes.
And I said to you, not just professionally about their weaknesses and skills and whatever, also
as a person.
personally, and that's where those stories. But you're right. I mean, those stories weren't necessarily just personally. They were talking about their own journey in the company and setting the culture.
Yeah. So, there's layers to people's lives, and the career should be part of their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate that picture of the
being separated or something.
Yeah, where you've got the justice thing, you got the scales
in one
balancing
day,
life and your career.
In a 24 hours, work is right in the middle.
Well,
8 hours plus travel, 10 hours in the middle of that day. How can it be isolated from your life?
Exactly.
How? It's a big chunk in the middle of your life.
And it shouldn't be competing with the rest of your life.
Yes.
It should be integrated. It should be coherent and consistent with the rest of your life.
One of the people that I talk to, I think also organisational psychologists on their website, I love what they say. They say, work should be good for you.
Oh, yeah.
I thought this is amazing. Mm-hmm. I know you probably heard it a million times. Sorry, for me, it was a new first time I heard it. And it was like the most powerful 4 words. Work should be good for you. 4 or 5 words. So powerful.
Generally speaking, work is good for people. The people who work are much happier and healthier than people who don't work.
Yes.
Now, some
somehow, but why the culture in the last 15 years, which is, they want to tell us that's not the case. Why the culture in the last 15 years, they talk about the work-life balance and they think they're completely different things. They don't realize how much they influence each other. So why did we let them get away with it so much, whereby we're going, because I am 100% saying, I want you to be happy at work. This is where it's going. But how can you tell me, your life and your work can be completely separate in the sense they don't influence each other? You are kidding. You think you can come to work, be miserable at work, and you can at 5 p.m. switch off, go and catch up with a friend and be so beautifully happy? No way. So you need to work on both of them. You need to make sure both are good so they feed into each other.
Now, in some roles, it can be helpful if you do cut off. You cut yourself off and you separate yourself from your work when you finish.
Okay.
So one of the examples of
like working in a hospital, seeing some really bad stuff.
Exactly. So where you see a lot of bad stuff. So the classic example of that is police. They see, particularly when the general duties, the people in uniform, they see a lot of terrible things.
I forgot about
as
that.
part of their
You're right, but can I just stop you there, David? You're absolutely right, and thank you for opening my eyes about that. I totally forgot because we work in IT. You forget about these things. So great point. However, really what we are discussing here and your profession is, no, I shouldn't say that. I keep thinking just management and stuff. I guess we are talking about the culture at work, meaning all that toxic politics and between colleagues and interactions. This is all I'm thinking about for some reason when I'm talking to you about this stuff. But I guess you're right. Part of what you do, if you're talking to an employee who is working with death and whatever, that's really How do you distinguish between the two? How do you in your profession distinguish between the politics, the management, the people, the colleagues versus part of your work, the bad stuff in your work?
So sometimes, and look, with the police, often they've developed good coping strategies for seeing dead people, car accidents, and other potentially traumatic experiences like that. And they've developed over time pretty good coping mechanisms. But they've got on top of all that, they've still got all the hassles about shift work, about a grumpy, belligerent boss, about having a bit of a beef with other people on their work team. So it's often
deal with
additive.
Both. You could be doing with both, right?
You've got to manage both. So you've got the normal stresses and irritants
part of their role
of work, of any work. But then on top of it, they've got seeing dead bodies, the possibility of being shot at, all these other unique things. But that's true for a lot of other people. So in people who work in mines, oil drilling, highly dangerous environment. And they've got bosses and conflicts and things like that.
I get what you mean. Thanks for just you reminded me. I totally forgot until 3 minutes ago. that there are two aspects of, let's call it maybe stress. Shall we just at high level as part of a role? It's the actual role, meaning in this case, for example, you're a surgeon and someone dies on the operating table. But then you've got the, what should we call the other one? The organizational stress, meaning dealing with the boss and the employee and the secretary and whatever. What do you call that?
So it is workplace stressors. So
workplace, yes.
Workplace stresses. But then you can also talk about your work experience. So the workplace stressors, to be pedantic, but I think it's a useful distinction. Mm-hmm. So there's so stressors are things in the external environment that potentially cause stress, like conflict and a bad boss and role confusion, not knowing what your job is, or conflict.
Wow, so this is really interesting.
So there's the external environment, and that's often where it can be useful to do where job design is important. So
external. I mean, it's all external. If you're police, you're on the street and dealing with people.
Yeah, no, that's external. That's outside. But then there is the person's experience of that, how they perceive it after they've processed.
All right. So how I want to be able to refer to them, those two categories. How can you help me to refer to them? In the case of a police officer, when he's on duty out there speaking with bad people and things happening, versus when he's dealing with the boss and the colleague.
Yep.
What are the?
So they're both, if you like, stressors. They are are
how
external
these categories. So I want to be able to just refer to them in my question. Next question to you: how can I refer to the difference between?
So there would be the types of workplace stressors that would be encountered in any job, be it in the office or working at a garage, working in a factory, working in an open coal mine. These are just things about work that everyone would have in common. So that would be things like bad boss, conflict with being bullied, conflict, not knowing what your job is, unreasonable work demands, those things.
I'm talking about the things relating to your colleagues and managers and bosses, meaning people in your company, the stress that comes from interacting with people in your company versus the external people.
So the external
the
people.
Police, the gangster versus the colleague or the boss. Yeah. In the case of a salesperson, the client versus the internal people, should we say, versus external people?
Look, that's one way to divide it. And I think it would make a difference if you've got an expectation that when you go back to the office,
I want to ask you a question. If I can ask, I need to be able to distinguish between those two groups of.
I'm not sure if it really makes that much of a difference.
Okay, I'll tell you why. Well, let's assume it's internal and external, shall we? Internal meaning everybody in your company.
Okay, I meant internal inside yourself, external the rest of the world. But you use it.
I want to use internal people, staff within your company.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
That includes above you, below you, and on your level. Yeah. Yep. And the people that you might be, some people don't deal with people. You're in a factory just working on the line. You don't deal with people, Yeah. And the people that you might deal with in your profession externally, such as a client, a gangster, a patient on the operation table. Yeah. Shall we say that?
Okay.
All right. The question to you is, I would like to see what you think of this theory I'm going to throw at you.
Yep.
No matter how stressful it is, dealing with those external folks that you have to deal with as part of your role.
Yes.
If the internal is really good, and as we said before, good for you, when we say work good for you, meaning the people at work, you're in an environment that you're happy and comfortable and psychologically safe. You feel that you can be yourself. If you've got mental illness, if you've got disabilities, that you can really be yourself. All these things, if these are good, in my opinion, it would make a huge difference of dealing with the external people that could be stressful in your role.
Yes, I would agree with that. So it's good to have a safe place that you feel comfortable and safe, and you go back into the castle drawbridge comes up and you can relax then
Right.
because you're safe.
Nicely said.
Or you go into the family home and hopefully it's a good
Feel
family
supported as
environment
well.
and you feel safe. You know, people will accept you for who you are, and you know, you can just be yourself. You can take off all the fancy
Especially
duds.
when you're speaking about that problem that you've just had with those
and
external
you know
people,
they're
that
gonna
trauma that you've just gone through, if it's trauma,
Yep.
as opposed to maybe just a conflict-based conversation with a client or whatever, you know, confronting conversation. At least knowing that you've got that environment, you can actually be yourself speaking about it, and really talking about how it's affecting you and stuff, and itself immediately, it makes a big difference.
So you look, I agree totally with what you're saying in terms of it really does help people to feel safe and to recover from you know, the stressful external worlds or the battlefields. If we're going to use
that's
that
actually
metaphor.
we should have used the army as a profession. Good one.
The army or military forces are usually really good at a lot of things to do with leadership and management because they were basically the ones who invented it.
Oh wow!
Thousands of years
true
ago.
When you think about it.
So you know the Roman army. So Rome was successful basically because of the management techniques of the Roman army.
The word organisation, literally.
They had organisations,
right?
They had hierarchies, they had groups, they
their army would have been
standards.
bigger than their own population, probably. When you take about the Roman Empire, with the army in all their throughout their empire and all the colonies or whatever, would probably amount to bigger than what's the people in Rome.
So I think Rome at its height was about 1 million people.
In Rome
itself, Romans. And I think there was more people in the Roman army because exactly as you say,
I did it as a guess.
They recruited from all the provinces.
Yeah. So they had to
general
create an
raised
organisation.
his own army. Yes. So it was very well organised, and the technology and the management technology of the Roman army was one of the reasons why it was so successful, and they ruled the known world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, man. Such a fascinating world, your world.
We're quite discursive, aren't we? We've got onto but I think you know, the Roman army is relevant in terms of leadership, culture, and
share some
management.
example. That's anything that you still you think is still relevant now that you guys in your profession or at university use examples. Something. What would that be?
Look, it even goes back to the Greeks.
Sure.
So most of the things that we do. In terms of psychology, were basic. Most of the major philosophies and principles of modern psychology, you can see the foundation or the genesis of it back in the philosophers of Greece.
Some of the names there.
So Stoicism is something that's been very popular lately. So the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, he's Roman, but
and what is that?
So Stoicism is the idea that, and it's not that you don't have any emotions. The idea is that you should have control over. You should manage your emotions, and you should use your imagination. You should use your emotions in order to be a good person and to do the right thing, and that. It's not so much what you think or feel, but what you do that determines your value as a person.
Got it.
So you need to have mastery over your thoughts and your emotions in order to ensure that you do the right things, because doing the right things is what matters.
Yeah.
Now, anyone who knows anything about cognitive behavior therapy will recognize that. So cognitive behavior therapy is the premier psychological therapy that's of the moment. It's the one that's recommended for pretty much because it's been shown scientifically to be the most effective therapy, cognitive behavior therapy for anxiety, depression, and insomnia.
Okay, give us an example in the case of anxiety, which is probably 75% of the population got that problem. What are we talking about
so
here?
you have an internal dialogue.
Oh, yes.
You have your own voice talking to yourself.
Yes.
And
telling you not good enough, telling you you're too short, you're too long, you're too white, you're too black, you're too whatever, right?
Yes, exactly. So there's this internal critic that's criticizing you. And if you listen too much to that critic, then how do you feel? Okay, how do you feel if this voice inside your head is always telling you you're a bad person, you're hopeless, you're never going to succeed? How's that going to make you feel over time?
Not great. Not great, I'm assuming.
No. Well, classically, that's what happens inside the heads of people who suffer from anxiety and depression. Because,
so this thing then, what's the recommendation here?
So the idea is that you then, so you balance it out and you make that internal dialogue match reality. And so the idea is you get, and look, there's all kinds of different flavors of cognitive behavior therapy, but basically the idea is to change your internal dialogue.
Solution, you mean? Yeah.
From being negative,
to be positive,
self-critical, to being either positive.
But how do you do it? Give us one example that you guys use, a tool or something. Just give me one idea. We're not going to solve that problem now. It becomes another 3-hour session.
Okay, so I'm terrible at public speaking.
Sure.
I hate public speaking, and I always screw up public speaking.
Yeah.
You always screw up public speaking? Yes. Okay, this is me as coach or therapist. Have you ever spoken in public and it's gone well? Well, yeah. Okay. So it's not true to say that you always screw up.
So rationally you're working with it.
So it's rationality. So one of the versions of it is called rational.
So typically those voices and that stuff from anxiety, typically it's not rational. So therefore someone like you can bring the rational thing
very quickly upon the basis of it. So it's being rational and being evidence-based around
to counter that stuff.
To counter that negative
because typically those negative things, they're not rational. That's because why can you bet on that? Because if they were rational, then you're in trouble, right? So how do you
it's to try, you're exactly right. It's to try to make the people's internal dialogue, their self-talk, more rational. Not necessarily positive, but often positive is good. So it's better to have a positive bias.
And if you make them rational, that means they're going to accept them. Whether, you're not telling them, oh, no, that voice is bad or whatever. You're just saying, look, that voice is not true. Here's the facts.
Well,
so therefore they can go, okay. I can believe that. I do have some rationality in me. I can understand logic. I believe that's something I can work with, and you can just grow from there. Yeah,
you've just explained it very well.
Okay, so if that's the case, how do you
So this is often going back to coaching, and this is often where you work with people's weaknesses or their derailers, the things that get in. So this is often people who are fantastic, and this is often I get referred to people who get referred to work with people who are fantastic, who have brilliant strengths. They have a huge amount of potential, but they've got something that's holding them back. They've got a derailer or a critical flaw, which may be
it's
internal.
Similar. You're saying it's that voice.
So it's the voice.
They have that voice for
head,
those areas.
That critical.
And you try to work with them rationally, and start that positive spark and grow it slowly.
And so often this is a confidence issue. And this is probably something that is more women suffer from than men.
So this hugger person in our previous example, who happens to score very high in the agreeable thing as part of the big five.
Yeah.
So, and in my example, if we want to help them to become more assertive, you're saying if you start by saying, look, let's work with your strength, just tell them how you feel. You're saying
I can't do that because they might not like me.
Sure. But then you have to work with the rationality aspect. You're saying, listen, you're not actually creating conflict. You're asking them to recognize what's going on. That's not really creating conflict. You're asking them to see the facts. These are facts. We created a measurable system here, and the system says blah. They can either argue the system is wrong, and you're more than happy to talk about that and come and talk to me as well. Or if they think the system is fair, they should be able to explain to you how they feel about it. So again, it came back to rational system, right?
But often people have very good, particularly if they're smart, they've got very good explanations inside their head because they've been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah.
But it's internal. And they will have very good rationales for why they can't possibly do it. How it might work for you, but it wouldn't work for me.
So how would they find a problem here? What would that be the problem? If we said the numbers, the system will show them. You don't have to even say it. You say, how do you feel about this result?
They'll blame me. So
what do you do then?
Okay, where's the evidence that they will blame you?
What
do you base that on? So this is where
again,
our very good friend.
That's the similar thing. You're right. That's that voice. Yeah.
So again, going back to one of our Greek friends, good old Socrates. So you basically just ask questions. Tell me more about that. Is that true? Where's the evidence?
I can't believe it. They did that 3,000 years ago?
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah.
Why do we think they were animals back then, people?
Oh, no. Look, the Greeks are always put up as the fathers, if you like, of
I've heard it before.
European civilization. And they basically sorted out most questions of philosophy.
But what I mean, even in recent histories, your granddad would have never had that patience with your dad, let alone, I'm talking about 3,000 years ago. Can you imagine your granddad saying to your dad, so David's dad, how do you feel about messing up the garden when you were playing with your friend yesterday? Killed all the tomatoes and the cucumbers I was working on for the last 6 months to grow.
So this is going back to cultures.
It's unbelievable that this happened 3,000 years ago.
That was still pretty hierarchical. So I think
and brutal in certain areas.
Oh yeah, totally brutal, and they weren't Democrats at all.
How do you get this guy then doing that, talking about that, recognizing that, practicing that?
There was just a lot of very clever people, and
are we missing
one of the
something?
Things is they wrote it down.
Are we missing things in the history? Have things been deleted from history?
Yeah. Oh, most things. So. We only know, even for the Romans, we only have a tiny fraction of all the things that were written in Rome. Same for the Greeks. A lot of we know there were volumes and volumes that all these people wrote or people wrote down when they were talking in the forum. But that's Roman. But anyway, in the when they were giving their lectures, and we've got like half a volume of 24.
Got it.
Same again, getting ancient history nerdy. The Library of Alexandria was burnt down, and it was the central.
Alexandria? Where's Alexandria again?
Greece. Egypt. It's at the.
Is that where the Mongols dumped it in a river or something, or is that different?
Sure
burned down.
I think it was possibly Persians, but anyway, it was like the Library of Congress of its day. Every single worthwhile book in the ancient world was held in the Library
and the
of
Romans
Alexandria.
Built it? Was it a Roman thing?
I'm not sure who built it. I think it was Egyptians. Or one of those. Anyway. It was burnt down in one of the sackings, and so we lost most of the wisdom of the ancient world.
This is like burning all the servers of Google. Can you imagine?
It's when yes. If if Sergey or someone just goes delete, push the big red delete button. Yes. Hopefully there's a backup. Anyhow.
Okay. What do you ever get involved into any debate or conversations or readings about reconciling modern, let's call it modern psychology, which is the industry that you're part of, with the ancient knowledge or concept of mindfulness?
Okay, yeah.
Do you take interest in that?
Yes.
Can you see how you can the two reconcile, or do they go against each other too much?
No. Look, mindfulness is very similar to the ancient meditative practices.
Yeah.
Because it's
I
real.
thought was the father of even meditation. Meditation is probably an instrument of that.
Yeah, ancient,
Nevertheless,
ancient, Hindu or Eastern cultures.
what, roughly, do you know how many
is
thousands of years the stuff we're talking about? 5,000?
Yeah. Got a mate who's Hindu and interested in all this.
The reason I'm asking,
Yep.
the reason I'm asking, David, as you were talking about the voice when we talked about anxiety, that voice in your head telling you not good at this, and I'm going, this is absolute foundation in mindfulness, which you've got the mind versus the real you.
Yeah.
And how when you become better at recognizing that, you start to even find a smile on your face. Sometimes you go, I can see what's going on here. And you would,
So that's one of the techniques in one of the most popular recent approaches to cognitive behavior therapy, or ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy. And so one of the things you get people to do is practice mindfulness.
They do? You guys do now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Sorry.
It's very, very popular.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things you do is very similar to meditation, is you just focus on something, and you just, one of the characteristics about the cognitive behavior rational approach, which is a very Western approach, is that you engage with the thoughts and you engage in debate in order to rebuke those words.
The thought, the positive thought, the rational
the negative thought. You argue with your brain, and you engage in a struggle with your brain as to what's the correct thought or the most functional thought.
And that will hopefully lead you to,
and that will hopefully
bring the rationale
to be
into
more
it.
rational. Now, the acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, takes a more meditative Eastern approach to it, even though they'll say it's based upon another thing. It really looks like mindfulness and meditation. Is they say basically you just focus on something and you don't interact with with the thoughts, because the struggle,
be in the now versus the past or the future.
Yes, be in the now.
In the moment.
Don't struggle with the thoughts, because it's the struggle that causes anxiety.
Yeah.
Just let them go.
So there's conflict here where you're saying one science or one approach is saying engage with that thought.
It's a different approach. Both lead to the same place, where the intrusive thoughts are no longer causing distress.
Fair enough.
And no longer interfering with your life. You can either struggle with it, which is rational and Western and scientific. Where's the evidence for this? Or you take
it's
a
how
more
you're engaging with it.
meditative.
Now, forgive me, you're right. I guess I took it maybe too broadly when you're talking about engagement. But it takes, so you've got to educate that person how they're engaging with it. You're engaging with it in the sense with a pursuit of rationale. Can you find actually any rational in that thought? So then you prove it wrong, and that's how you.
So the instructions you give to people are slightly different. So rather than debating with your own thoughts, is this right or wrong? So the approach is that these thoughts are neither right nor wrong. They're just words. They're not true. They're not untrue. They're just words.
They're not based on anything.
They're just words.
Evidence-based. They're just words.
They may be true. They may not be true. But they're just parts of a story your brain is telling you.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter. And so the exercises are there.
But you're saying engage with it. How can you say it doesn't matter?
To move it away from you.
Yeah.
So its impact upon you.
But that's mindfulness.
Decreased.
You're pushing away to come back to the center.
You come back
to the moment.
It's very similar to meditation.
This is the only thing that's real. It's right now.
Yep. It's the now. And you just focus on what you want to focus on, not on the intrusive thoughts. And you just let them go. You don't engage with them. So you just look at it. The phrase used.
That's why I'm confused. Are we engaging with it or not?
Depends upon your approach. See, this is two schools of thought. Okay, there's There's different approaches within psychology. Some people take the standard approach to cognitive behavior that authors like Beck or Wolpe originated. A lot of people are now, because the meditation or the mindfulness part of it is very useful in terms of just teaching people how to relax and to calm down. So it's useful whether or not you do the cognitive stuff.
Look, let's get to the center of this point here. I would like for you to make sure you explain it to me and to audience. It seems to be engaging but not engaging. Okay. Are you saying that the engaging thing is you've got this thought that's coming through like this? It's like a little cloud.
Yes, exactly.
You engage with it on the basis of you're just going to recognize they're just words and therefore grab it and push it away. So that's the extent of the engagement, or?
Yes. So that's.
Okay.
So that's one of the images. So sometimes it's a leaf and it helps if. So some people are very good at visualizing in their mind's eye. And so they can imagine it exactly as Chris said, like leaves are just trickling down a stream. And you just observe them. You don't engage with them. You don't interact with them, but you just acknowledge that they're there.
But you said engage before in modern.
No, okay. These are two.
This
is Ford versus Holden. Okay, red team versus blue team.
Okay. People that say engaged, talk to me about the engaged. What kind of engagement?
So the red team is the traditional cognitive behavioralists, and they're the ones who take that stoic or scientific approach, and the idea is that you rationally examine the techniques.
What that thought is.
Sorry, you rationally examine the thoughts. And you have a kind of argument with yourself. Where's the evidence for this? What's a statement that's closer to the truth? So that's red team.
Sure.
Blue team, it's still trying to win the same pennant, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Playing the same game, but they're saying no. Doing it that way is creating a struggle, which causes a distress. So don't do that. Don't engage with the thoughts. Just let them be and just visualize them as clouds or leaves, and you just observe them like a curious but disengaged scientist. And you just watch it go by, and you let it go, and you can visualize the thoughts. So kind of in your mind's eye,
that will help you to get back to the now.
Type out, the letters for the thoughts, and you can you visualize it going past like a meteorite, just going across the sky.
And that will help you to. Now it's gone away to get back to the now.
And there's other exercises you can do. So if you've got images, say. One of the things you can do is so sometimes the intrusive thoughts are in the forms of not sounds, but images. So one of the exercises you can do is that you have a big screen like that. So it starts off, the image, you put it onto a 65-inch OLED 4K screen. And then, same image, you then put on a little computer monitor halfway across the room, and it's smaller and dimmer and more fuzzy. And then you put it on, a little phone screen, 4 inches across, and it's getting small, and you're moving it further and further away.
You want to see it diminishing.
You're diminishing it.
Yes,
it's still there, but it's very small.
The presence of it is diminishing, so the power of you will diminish.
And there's other exercises you can do with the, say, intrusive sound. You're stupid. You're an idiot. You'll never be any good. Okay. One of the things you can do is, again, have it starting off, beautiful hi-fi clarity. And then you put it in a little tinny speaker across the room. And
it's a tool you're giving to that person.
And you're giving
asking them to do that?
Yes, you're getting them to visually move it further away.
Yeah.
Or the other thing you can do is you can put it in a ridiculous voice. So, sorry, I'm going to indulge myself. You are stupid. You are stupid. You're an idiot. You will never be any good. Now, I like that because I think Arnie is hilarious.
Okay.
So I can't take anything that Arnie says in that ridiculous accent seriously. So think of someone who you think of is hilarious, your favorite comedian. Then you get that person to say the intrusive, negative, or critical
That's a good
thought.
tool as well. Like, and whereby they're never start to see it.
They're not serious.
That's interesting. Or you're saying the tool is you're telling them, and you're seeing a huge screen reader close to you, and you've got these 50 others behind it all the way until it becomes tiny, and move it through until you diminish it to tiny. You can hardly see it.
Until it just disappears.
Completely disappears. That's interesting.
And it's just...
So that is one of the tools you give your people.
And it's just
patients.
exactly the same as about transcendental meditation. But if you do meditation training, the idea is you just usually focus on your breathing. So that's part of the mindfulness too. You do your square or your box breathing. Inhale, hold it, and you put your attention on the breathing.
Yeah.
But
the idea of that, as I said, you're not to engage anything else. And you're coming back to the center, to the real thing.
Center, or you can focus, if it's mindfulness, on the ambient environment around you. Sensation of your body sitting on the chair, the sound of the air conditioning, and you just focus on
These are real things.
So you just be there in the moment, or you could be sitting on the beach and you're just looking at the waves.
Yeah, beautiful tree next to you, etc. Yeah.
Depending upon the peaceful scene.
Yeah.
And it can be either real if you're down at the beach, or you can just
imagine
visualize
sure.
your favorite one. And you focus on that. And if the intrusive thoughts come to you, just let it go.
Yeah.
And you just focus on the waves and the sand.
Bring back yourself to what you know that's real. Yeah.
And if you do get distracted by that, don't worry about it. Let it go.
Back. Yeah.
Bring yourself back to the center. So a lot of meditative, I think transcendental, gives you a mantra and a mandala. So you've got the mantra, which fills up your auditory field by the chanting, your chant chakra. I get the names wrong. And then there's the visual. You can also have a visual pattern. It's like a complex pattern, and you have to remember it, and you have to work hard and concentrate on visualizing.
Again, you're engaged in a real thing.
You're focusing in on this emotionally.
So you've got no capacity to worry about these clouds passing by.
And the idea is you fill up your brain with these other things.
Yeah.
So there's no room in your brain for these thoughts.
Those negative thoughts.
Because the nature abhors a vacuum, and if you try and think of nothing at all, it happens.
How about How about so do you the modern science, would that be correct to say this started the founders of that would be the Greek philosophers?
So
our current modern
CBT
psychology
was explicitly founded upon Stoic principles. The guys who developed it, Walpe and Beck, specifically alluded to that philosophy.
All right. So in terms of and tell me if that's correct. In terms of the mindfulness, the way they view the for example, I'm going to anxiety or those negative thoughts, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Because in the modern psychology, you're saying, these negative thoughts or these voices, the voices.
Okay. Yeah.
The voices, mindfulness tell you, they are trying to engage you. The reason they become those voices, the reason they become anxiety-based, they create anxiety on you. They have that anxiety effect on you, is because they are engaging you in the future and the past. Or, most likely they are saying, because you did blah, because blah happened, that's what's going to happen to you in the future.
Yep.
So this whole past and present, and therefore the now, is why it is the center of that whole philosophy, really. Yeah, it's the past, the future, and the now. And they're saying, so is there any link? Is that how it's described in modern? Also, those negative thoughts do you guys teach that they are typically related with your experiences in the past, what you did, and your fear of what that could lead to?
Yes, exactly. So people have rationales inside their head because this happened in the past. It will always
Lead to
happen
blah.
in the future.
Ah, I didn't even say that. That's an interesting aspect of it. What I was thinking is, because you lied to blah, you're going to be caught and go to jail. I'm saying like this, the effect of it, the consequences. I was thinking, but what you said is true as well. The repetition aspect of it isn't. I didn't think about that. But
so one of the things, one of the characteristics of people who are, say, depressed or have very strong negative explanatory styles, it's called the 3 Ps. So they say it's permanent. I have always been a loser, and I will always be a loser.
Okay.
So that's permanent.
Sure.
It's personal. It's not situational. It's me. I'm the common cause of all the bad things that have ever happened to me, and I can't change, so it will always happen to me.
I've never heard of that triple P.
And it's also pervasive. Everything I do is bad. All this problem happens all the way through my life because it's about me. I am fundamentally flawed.
Permanent, personal, and pervasive.
Yes.
Wow.
And if someone believes that, you can just see how depressed you'd be if that's how you saw the world and yourself.
Yeah.
So often the aim is to break down these distorted negative explanatory styles.
And why are you telling me this? Because my question, I'm just trying to remember the question. No, sorry, David. Yeah. I didn't mean negative. I'm just being scientific approaching that from the debate point of view. So my question was, does the modern sort of psychology also connect those voices or those negative thoughts that create anxiety with the fact that they continue to link what happened in the past to therefore what will happen in the future? They engage you in that. They engage you in all of that. So therefore, you're stuck in you find yourself stuck in past and future and never in the moment.
So our brain is basically a prediction machine.
Here you go.
Its job is to predict.
So you guys agree with mindfulness on that then?
Yeah. So we need to predict future.
Yeah.
Because that's where either all the good or bad things happen. So we need to be able to predict.
Is that part of our sort of risk elimination, especially when we're living in the jungles with animals and stuff? We need to, just to protect ourselves. We need to think a little bit ahead of what could happen, and
Yes. So being up,
So why does that become bad then? We need it to survive, and people need it to survive for millions of years. So how did that become now bad?
Because some people's logic or perceptions become distorted. So I often see this in professionally trained people. So professionals are usually trained to be professionally pessimistic. Our role is to is to identify the bad things.
Yeah, we become very cynical.
Not so much. No, it's not cynical, but as a psychologist, clinical world anyway, we deal with people who have mental health disorders, who have problems, and so we become very good at identifying or diagnosing mental health issues or psychological problems. Medicos are trained to diagnose diseases and disorders. Accountants trained to look for discrepancies.
Sure, we solve problems. I mean, whatever we are technically good at, we solve problems.
It's actually adaptive in a lot of ways to see the negatives, to see the risks, because our ancestors who didn't see the risks were eaten.
Yeah.
But also, it also helps, and this is the dichotomy in our brains and being human, or even being animals, is that we need to also predict the good things. Where's the food? So where's the food? Where's the good things going to be? Where am I going to find a mate? Where am I going to find a safe cave or what's the best tree to climb up when I see a leopard over there? So we need to be able to identify.
So prediction is not always bad.
It's not always bad. So you need to be able to be good. So you need to be able. Your brain is constantly shifting between risk assessment and opportunity assessment.
Right. So it should be, you're saying.
So yes, it should be. Now, sometimes through training or your early childhood or circumstance, people's typical explanatory style becomes more negative or pessimistic. And that's often adaptive to, particularly in high risk or dangerous environments. It really helps, like if you grew up in Syria over the last 20 years, it's a highly dangerous, so you're likely to have the ones who survive are the ones who can identify the risks and the dangers out there. But on the other hand, people who have a positive or an optimistic bias, at least in our societies, tend to be healthier, happier, and more successful than people who have a pessimism.
Yes. And you're saying in the case of mental illness, there might be an imbalance of that whereby too much focus on risk, on issues, on problems.
Yes.
The prediction machine is mostly focusing on problems.
I think that's an important part of it. That's complex beyond that, but I think that's a reasonable, if you like,
very high level
in how people perceive the world. And if you perceive it as always being threatening and negative, and you see yourself negatively as well, that's you're going to be afraid a lot, and you're going to,
that's anxiety,
and you're going to be driven and ruled by fear,
and you tend to become not socialize as much or whatever. You tend to be isolating. You start to isolate because of that. Again, high level here, but that's sort of...
Yes, so people in pain and who are suffering tend to focus in on themselves and just look after, they focus on the pain and they become more selfish because they're suffering.
Oh, the isolating thing it's got a selfishness attribute to it? Or reason to it?
Yeah, so
give me an example. Explain that.
If you're ill, so sometimes how I explain it is, a sick dog will go under the house.
Oh, yes.
And people who are in pain, because every waking moment they have an experience of pain, that rules their life, and they tend to be. So people in pain who are ill tend to, sense rationally, focus in on themselves and their pain and their suffering and managing that. Now, they may not be managing in a very effective way, but
if people are help, if you know that people are of help to you as opposed to the source of the problem, why would you be withdrawing then?
Often because for one reason or another, they don't trust other people.
Yeah, that would then lead to that. That becomes the dog who's in physical pain by maybe a human being or another thing that is walking around. They need to protect physically themselves from the environment. Yeah. So you're saying here that would be, take us through this whole when people withdraw. Explain that to me one more time. It's really fascinating, David. I would love to understand it a bit better.
But they won't necessarily always withdraw, but they will certainly become more self-centered.
That's what I'm fascinated about. You call it self-centered, and people look at them and they feel sorry for them. They think they are not coping with the world, as opposed to you saying, no, hold on. They're doing it as self-preservation, as self... Interesting. I never thought about it like that. Not convinced by it yet.
So sometimes so the negative explanatory style of pessimism often extends to other people. Why are you helping me? Why should you help me? What's in it for you?
God.
I don't trust you.
Oh my God.
Why would you help someone as awful as me?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you doing? What's in it for you?
Okay.
No, go away.
Mm.
And that's
But you call it selfishness as opposed to call it,
self-centered.
They're trying to
There's probably
protect
a better
themselves.
term for it. Yeah, they're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to look after themselves.
Fair enough. There's
But
correlation there.
Part of the disorder, for want of a better word, probably a better way of expressing it, is that they don't reach out. So people who are suffering and reach out are more likely to find help and assistance and not continue to suffer.
The withdrawal.
So often, yes. People who do trust others will reach out because they expect other people to help them. They're not as negative in their expectations about others. So they're more likely to resolve their issue because they are going to reach out. But if your negativity, your pessimism is pervasive, then you say it's no point helping me because I'm bad and it won't work. I've tried that. It's not going to work. Why should I even try? Why bother? I'm just going to disengage.
But that's not selfishness. That's not protecting yourself. You just lost faith that they could be helped.
Yes.
They're beyond help. You're wasting my time. You're boring me, whatever.
Yes, but they are very...
You're annoying even at some point. You keep trying to help me.
Yes. So it's self-focused. I'm sure there's a better word out there, which I'll remember the moment we turn off the mics.
Sure.
Out there. But it is...
But I can see though the overlap there in some cases. Yeah.
It's that the pessimism extends to the expectations of others. So this is one of the cognitive biases or distortions in terms of people do something what's called mind reading. I know what you're thinking, and you I don't know what it is, but I know that you don't like me, or that you're trying to exploit me in some way. It's projection. Actually.
How do we reconcile this with this notion that you hear people describing other people, or some people opening up and saying about themselves that they find it hard to trust people because they've been hurt in the past, they've been let down in the past, etc. They start to really build these guards and don't open up anymore and don't trust people. Like you see someone smiling at you and you think they want to sell you something. You can't get yourself to smile back. You don't have the courage.
Yes.
What do you call that? How do you describe it in your profession? What do you call that?
It's just really, I'll just call it about people's expectations. Again, it's that prediction. And it's people are trying to understand and predict the future.
So they stay, they're meeting someone and they can't get themselves to really be themselves, to just say, hey, you're welcome, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Always careful. They're so careful. You can see that in them.
So
what do you call that?
The brain is both initially a pattern recognition device and also a prediction device.
Yes.
So it looks over time and looks for correlations or patterns in what it sees, and it builds up a model of the world based upon its experiences or its perceptions and what it's seen before. And on the base of that model, it predicts what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
Now, if that past has a lot of trauma and people treating that person badly, negative experiences with other people, then that's their model of what people do, particularly to me. And so they then extrapolate from that past into the future and expect all other their future experiences with other people to match their past experiences with others, which may not be true. But 80%.
They miss out on so many opportunities in life.
Yes. So
because of that.
So there's some genetic element in this. 50-50.
Can you work with
experiences.
someone on such a problem? And have you worked with someone on such a problem? And is there?
So that's
can
what
you
clinician,
make a difference
that's
in
what
their life?
clinician. So if we're talking about mental health issues along those lines, then that would be what a clinical psychologist, would do with their patients.
What do you call that? Let's say I've got a patient who's too careful, doesn't trust people, always puts up the guards, shake hands with people, very careful. And you can see them, they are missing out on friendships and opportunities all over the shop every single day.
Yeah.
What do you call that? And what would that do psychology? Can they work with them to get them to start to change that whole too much of a pattern prediction, too much of a connecting what they think they know about the world or their own experiences into what they think this person is?
So basically getting people to
start
find
to trust
a way
more.
of trusting more and developing better ways of living and interacting with people.
Can be done.
It's basically what therapy is about. Going
I didn't
back
even know
and
that.
Changing.
I've never been to one.
Changing people's way of again, depends upon the therapy, their way of being, their relationship with themselves, their relationship with others, be it family members or their work colleagues. Now, with their work colleagues would kind of overlap with what I do. So sometimes I'll see someone and they've got their negative explanatory style has implications in their private life as well. So what I often do is I would refer them to one of my clinical psychologist colleagues and they can work with them on their personal issues or their personal relationships and how they see the world and that sort of thing. And I would work with them with the manifestations of that negative explanatory style in the workplace. So, for example, I had one person I was working with who was a occupational health and safety person.
Okay.
She was fantastic at it. She'd go into a work site, a building site was where she tended to work, and she would see every single hazard in that place because she had this negative explanatory style and she was great at seeing everything that was wrong.
Got it.
Okay. Then, of course, she was one of the highest performing. So what did they do? What do you do with your highest performing professional staff? You promote them to be manager.
Right.
How do you think someone who sees the flaws
in everything,
how do you think that person goes
with
as a manager?
Team members.
Terrible.
Wow.
So she was referred to me to deal with that.
That's a great example, David.
And I see that a lot because, again, remembering back at half an hour or so ago, I said about how professionals are trained to be negative, which works well when you're dealing with spreadsheets or stresses in bridges and things like that. It does not work very well with people. It's far better if you're going to have a bias or an error when working with people is to have a positive bias, to be more optimistic.
Yes.
So again, building on strengths idea is it's you're going to be a better manager and leader if you on the positive side.
Building on strength.
So that's the building on strengths. It's the positive psychology. If you focus on the positives,
oh my God, you brought it home beautifully.
It's going to work much better for everyone. Which is not to say you ignore underperformance and things like that.
No.
But the ratio,
common place for these things anyway.
The ratio they've found is that you need, if you're giving feedback or dealing with things, you need at least 4 to 5 times as much positive feedback or information than you do negative, because negative emotions have anything from 2 to 5 times the emotional impact of positive relations. So if we're talking about performance management systems, and you say talk about, okay, having a balance between the good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
What are people going to remember and be impacted by the most?
The positive stuff.
No.
Oh, remember and impact. Yes.
Because the negative is going to be 4 to 5 times. So if you could do equal good and bad news,
not good.
All the good news disappears under this massively impacted bad news.
Preempt that, having 4 times more.
So you need to have you've got to have a lot of good news in there to even get a balance in there. So
this is amazing.
So this is why there's been a lot in the last 20 years or so. There's been a lot of interest and effort going into positive psychology, because it seems to work much better in therapy, and also particularly in the workplace.
Yeah, I've changed a lot, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job right now. I work with the product team, creative people, builders, they're rebuilders, developers, rebuilders. We love building things, right?
Yep, making stuff. Yep.
Yeah. And we have imagination as well. People that tell you we don't have imagination, they're so wrong. Whilst we're scientists and stuff, but we definitely have imagination.
It's very creative.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Because it's a combination of art and a science. Building software for the last 20 years at least. Before that, maybe it's different. Software engineering, that word, it's used, thrown around everywhere. But as an engineer, no difference between you or an architect, between you and building a beautiful building. Yep. When you look at a beautiful building, it has to be functional too.
Yes.
That glass panel, how does the truck, when it's broken, if it's broken for maintenance purposes in 20 years' time, how do we going to get the crane? Where's the crane going to be standing and whatever to grab it, to put it there? So there's so much to it. It looks beautiful, but it's functional and reusable and all that part. Yeah.
So my dad was an engineer, and he always used to point out the difference between the architects who designed pretty things and the engineers who actually made sure that it didn't fall down and all the things you described. So the engineers, build stuff that actually works.
But architects have come a long way as well now. Like, architects, when they design something, they make 1,000 phone calls into their contacts all over in the world to what's the best way to source a panel like that. Is there a source for it in Australia? If it's going to be only from Italy, they approach they put that in the cost, including maintenance for the next 50 years, and even
it's that partnership between the art and the science.
Sure.
And it's yin and yang.
Yeah.
So you can't have one without the other.
So that's what we do in software build. So I deal with people like that every day. They're hardworking people, so good at what they do. And when I feel we're a bit distracted, we're not really, the momentum is lost a little bit, we're a bit distracted, going sideways or whatever, I used to immediately start to talk about the negative, point out what we've been doing wrong, to let them know, look, this is not good. We've got to stop doing that. I always now, for a while, always, before I open my mouth, think about the achievements in the last, say, week.
Yeah.
I found all these great things. I go, guys, just want to say it's been incredible. Yeah. We have done blah and a blah and a blah and a blah. Look at this thing, this problem that we got together and solved it, thanks to all of us, not just the 2, 3, 4, 5 people that did it. It took all these critical conversations and an amazing feedback from all of us and all of that, to do that. So I point out all of these things. Then I come down and say, look, but I'll tell you what, right now, I'm a little concerned here. I feel that we are going a little sideways. Okay. We're better than that, and I start to then talk about the issue and how we're going to solve it. And it's been amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I'm doing it without even knowing about any of this. Just
well, it's because
I've been testing. I've been seeing what works and what doesn't.
And you're sensitive and observant, and you would have observed, hopefully.
Yeah.
But when you say it one way, it works much better than
That's
doing
right.
it the other way.
That's right.
And so you've just followed your
trial and error.
learning
I agree.
and your experience.
Yeah.
So, good. Well done.
Thank you. I've had many years of doing it the bad way.
Yeah.
And I really feel, I say to people, that team, but every other team, it's, I mentioned it indirectly before, even with the leaders, I say to them, it's the quality of the conversation. To me, when I go into a meeting and walk out, I judge myself by how was the quality of the conversation. Clearly, I'm a high performance guy. I need to deliver on what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, sure.
So that's not it's a given even, because I'll always try to push as much as possible, right? But the bottom line is I judge myself right now because I know I can always get things done. I'm very competent with that.
Yeah.
But what was really maybe holding me back is the quality of the conversation. Yeah. So that is the biggest thing for me when I'm judging myself, how I'm doing. How did I feel as I'm leaving? Did I notice anybody sitting like this? Because I might have cut them off, not let them talk, not let them really speak their mind, didn't respect their thing. Was anybody feel like that, or was everybody just really bubbly and feeling good and the energy was good?
So I think one metric, one thing to pay attention to is how do you feel? The other, which you were just talking about then, is what's the difference in how the other people in the room feel? What's the impact on them?
Yeah.
How do they emerge from the room? Zinging and bubbly and enthusiastic.
Yeah.
That's the real measure.
Yeah.
Because again, all enterprises, businesses of any teams of any size, it's really about coordinating and directing, channeling, shaping the effort of all the dozens or hundreds or thousands of people who work for you. And the leaders never, no matter how good a coder you might be personally as an engineer, you will go mad if you try and do all the coding yourself. It's just not going to work.
No.
And so, your contribution is about getting all these other people to be excellent, to produce fantastic results and have high quality outcomes and to have high quality conversations with their team members. So it's that catalyst role, I think, that leaders have that's really important in terms of
catalyst,
just small, one person, but creating this
bubble effect,
throughout the whole system.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I try and get my people to do, is to think systematically about their role in the organisation and to think about their influence others and how they are able to shape the culture, shape the behaviour, shape the thinking, and shape the results and the performance. People, even if it's just a small team of half a dozen people, or whether it's 100,000 people in a large organisation.
I spoke with so many organisational psychologists. We never went into the actual psychology of it. We talked mostly on management and stuff. It's been really fascinating,
I'm a very
David.
discursive speaker, so it's always the risk. So I really appreciate the opportunity for me to just do. One of my registrars, people I'm supervising, asked me, David, have you ever had training in theatre sports?
Training in what?
Theatre sports, it was a thing that was big 25 years ago. But it's the idea is that
I don't know what that is.
You come in with a scenario, and you start off, and then the rule is you say yes and to everything, and so you just you improvise the show from that. And thank you for the opportunity for me to practice yes and and just to go where the conversation.
Okay, now I see what you mean. Sorry,
I usually have to pull myself back and say, right, that's getting really fascinating, all that stuff about ancient Greece, but we're really here talking about your sales team.
Yeah.
So I very much enjoyed the opportunity to free associate almost, and to have a very wide-ranging.
But you know, David, it's so fascinating what you achieved. Thank you. In terms of, we started with a question about boosting high performance, and asked a question of what would be the one thing you say to a leader, that you would say to a leader as you're helping them, or you would like them to know, for them to be able to help themselves, let's say. And you said to me it would be to get to know people, and we started from there. Yeah. To know people personally, to know people professionally, about meaning their weaknesses and strengths and skills and whatever. And we went from there. I mean, we brought it back home beautifully. I mean, it really interconnected. I really, really enjoyed this.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of depth.
Fun.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is there was a lot of depth to it. Okay. We went into the depth of that question.
Okay.
We went into the actual psychology.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I guess if nothing else, I've picked up a few things along the journey.
I'm sure you did.
I've remembered some of the things
I'm sure you did.
that I've learned along the way.
Yeah. Your world is fascinating.
Thank you. Look, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think so. I would have found something else to do. I'm very easily bored.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy this.
And do you find it challenging to keep yourself positive when you work with so many problems?
No.
Not to become cynical, perhaps.
Because it's the outcome is usually good. So I work a lot with of good people stories. Where either life or stress or jobs or just the situation they're in is maybe not perfect at the moment, and I would like to think that I've at least done some good by the end.
Got it. Yeah, you do make a huge difference. You've made a difference in my life now.
Okay, very good.
100%.
I like to hear that. Thank you.
100%. I've learned, my God, that triple P thing.
Yeah.
I've written something here which was the role of a leader. The leader needs to or should be role modeling the values and culture of the company. I know you and me heard it a zillion times. You hear it on Google and TED Talks or whatever, but it just connected in my head beautifully when you think about really what that meant. It's just amazing. He gave me a lot of ideas.
It's that consistency in word and deed that means you're going to have impact on others, because people have very strong, and you can bleep these things out, but people have a very strong bullshit detector, particularly Australians.
Yeah.
And if you are saying one thing and doing another, all of a sudden, no one's listening to you anymore. So he's full of bullshit.
Yeah.
He says this, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But then, 5 minutes later, he's doing the exact thing he's told us not to do.
I've made these mistakes before, David.
Yeah. And look, it's hard. It's often hard to do because often circumstances mean you can't be ideal. Yeah. You can't always be perfect.
And hence why people these days, and when I say these days, maybe the last 35 years, since you started your practice from the 90s, let's say, I'm assuming that, please correct me.
It actually goes back to the 80s, but anyway, go.
Okay. What I was about to say, or the claim I'm making here, is from the 90s maybe.
Yeah.
Is people naturally, they look at leaders or people talking, successful people talking, let's say in a TV interview, because TV was so influential back then, right?
Yeah.
and they are more attracted naturally. You don't have to tell them anything, to people who are what's the word? Authentic.
Yes.
And therefore, what I mean by authentic, showing vulnerabilities.
Yes.
They're not lying. They're not making themselves look perfect. They're talking about how they suck at this and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And it used to be back then, in the 80s or even before that. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it started in the 80s. But let's say prior to that, there was perfection. When you're on TV, oh my God, you have to look perfect and you have to speak perfectly. And then started to say people come in a kind of casual jacket and they sit like that and I suck at this and I'm good at that. People go, I like this guy. I can trust this guy more.
Yep. So part of it is about, I see someone who's like me. I can identify with that person.
Because no one is perfect anyway.
No one's perfect. So one of the best things Bob Hawke ever did in terms of people seeing him as authentic and real and a great leader is he cried on TV.
Not just drinking in the pub, but beer
well,
and
that was part of it being Australian. That's
stuff.
being Australian.
Yeah.
But when he cried, and it was with regard to a question about his daughter.
I can't remember that. I'm going to Google it now.
Yeah. No, he cried.
What was the topic?
So he was being interviewed, I'm not sure, 60 Minutes or Current Affairs.
You can't remember the question or the topic?
But it was I know it was around his daughter.
Oh, okay.
Who had a heroin habit.
Oh, that would do
and
it
it was
sure.
because he blamed himself because he was away having a career, being head of the ACTU. And so he blamed himself. And someone asked him about his daughter. So I can't remember the exact question.
It's
but he cried.
The biggest piece of guilt every parent has. I can connect with that.
People connected with that.
Of course.
And they thought,
every
this is
parent.
Real. They empathized with him. He's a real person. He's allowed himself to
that
be
conflict
open and
between
honest.
our career and our kids. Every parent has that.
And so he had great credibility from showing that vulnerability. Back to what you said about knowing them as a person. People believed he revealed himself as a human being.
He's an authentic guy.
Rather than, the perfect person.
Proper and perfect, yeah.
So that's one of the things now.
How do you know that? A
lot of people like myself advise people to be is to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Exactly what that means, I think, requires some
Bob Hawke had a big influence on the Australian culture, right? Pop culture. What would be the main thing you believe that he did that still sort of maybe resonates now in our culture?
He was a very Australian Prime Minister. All the others have been British, even Gough Whitlam, who was also a Labor Party guy, but he was patrician, different. He was like a god. Whereas,
even though he's the guy that was had the problem with the Queen.
Yeah, but Gough was very Australian, but he was
sure. The way he looked and spoke.
He was patrician and superior to everyone. Whereas Hawke, even though he was a Rhodes Scholar and had a brain the size of a planet, he seemed like one of us. He was Australian, so he was
a scholar. In what? What did he study?
He was a Rhodes Scholar. So this is, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but Rhodes Scholars is a scholarship that's given to people from the colonies, the British colonies, the former British colonies, to get to a scholarship to study at Oxford. So Bill Clinton,
Bob Hawke you're talking about?
Well, Bob Hawke got one. Tony Abbott had one. Bill Clinton had one.
Okay.
And it's a way of shaping the future world leaders. And it's given to people who show exceptional leadership potential.
Sure. So you're saying he was a smart guy.
He was a very smart guy.
He really spoke and behaved
like
like a normal average guy. And I was talking about the T-shirts and the drinking beer in the pub or whatever.
Beer and liking the shells and all that. So I think he was seen.
You can be a prime minister in Australia.
You can be an Australian. You can be a leader, and you don't have to be an aristocrat.
Great point. Great point, David. Yes. I agree now that you painted it like that.
He was seen to be a
and
common
very
man
successful
like
prime minister.
And he was
2 terms,
possibly the most popular Australian prime minister.
And made a big change. Was he part of the whole Medicare, for example, thing?
So again, partnerships are really important in leadership, and that's another thing I would say is often, so he and Keating together were a fantastic leadership team. They created
Keating was
a lot
his
of change.
finance guy,
treasurer.
right? Treasurer, yeah.
He was the hard man.
Yeah.
Keating was the nice guy. So yin and yang. So you often do see that in effective.
Oh, the other way around.
leaders.
I'm sorry. Who was the treasurer?
Paul Keating.
Yeah, the treasurer for Bob Hawke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I thought you might have flopped him, not realising, swapped him
Okay,
around.
yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things often, again, lessons about leadership, back to that initial thing, know the other person, but also what I said before that was it's not about you. Often it's about us as a leadership team. So often the most effective leaders are ones who have the leadership is done by a team. So often a CEO and a COO. So Elon's not very popular at the moment, but he's in SpaceX, his rocket company. He's the CEO and chief engineer, and he's the big ideas guy. He's got a COO, Glyn Shotwell, who's very down to earth, very sensible. She's an engineer, and she runs the business on a day-to-day basis, and she makes sure stuff happens when it's supposed to, on budget, on time, and all that. So this is often what I've observed too. You have the high-level transformational, inspirational leader like Elon or Bob Hawke, but partnered up with them, you've got someone who is more transactional or more operational, and takes the high level vision and organizes everything to make sure it happens.
Yeah.
And I see in my client organizations, I often do see that. So one of my clients at the moment has partnerships. They've just appointed a CEO, a COO rather. The CEO's been there for 12 years or so. And he loves, the royal visit and the high level stuff. But it wasn't me, it was before my time there. But he realized that he needed to organize the functions inside the organization better, because it's a post-M&A, post-merger organization. So he's brought in a very experienced operational manager to make sure shit gets done. And it gets done on time, on budget, and all that stuff. But he's not that interested. He's selling things. He's a salesman.
So it's that partnership, yeah?
It's the partnership. And partnerships are really important in leadership, but I characterize my coaching relationships as a partnership. I partner with my clients. We work together as a team in order to help them do whatever we're doing, developing their skills, building on strengths, solving problems, making sure stuff gets done. So
amazing.
Partnerships, relationships are really important at any level.
Maybe on this note, we'll leave it at that, David.
Okay.
It's really been amazing.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. You opened my eyes on so many things.
Okay, thank you.
I really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the opportunity to come on and talk really non-stop for a couple of hours.
A couple of hours. I
usually
don't
cut
know.
off before this.
It would have to be thousands of dollars per hour for me to pay you even near what I've learned from you. So I really appreciate it.
I'll send you an invoice on Monday.
Thousands of hours per hour it has to be. So yeah, I really appreciate you, mate.
Okay. No,
All the
pleasure.
best,
Okay,
and thanks
a lot.
for all that conversation.
Take care.
All right,
Cheers.
bye for now.